Thank you. These are usually pretty informal events for me. So let me go ahead and first introduce myself. And then, quite frankly, I'm not going to talk a lot until you've had a chance to ask me questions. So these events, from my perspective, are an opportunity for you to get to know somebody who wants to represent you, which means that my responsibility is to give you an opportunity to ask me what I would do or what I think about issues that are of concern to you. One of the things that I'm quite frustrated with right now is I feel that our current congressional representation does not care about our voice. They don't show up where we are, they don't listen when we speak, and the issues that they focus on are not issues that our communities are primarily concerned with. And I feel that the only way to be a good representative is to be here tonight talking with you and listening to the things that you are worried about. So brief intro. My name is Peter Crosby. I am running for Congress. I am in the Congressional District 2. If you've been following any of the redistricting information, that covers all of Davis County, Weber County, Box Elder County, Cache County, and Rich County. So that's the new CD2, which encompasses northern Utah to the west. I come from a military family. Many of you might know my mother, Tammy. She served, and my father also served. I have two older brothers who are both in and a younger sister. I was headed into the Army at one point in my life in the ROTC program at the University of Utah, and I blew my knee out, which ended my military career. I've been married to my wife, Amanda, for 20 years. We have three amazing daughters. Two of them are here this evening. One, Elaine, is a 10th grader, and our youngest, Elizabeth, is in 8th grade. Our oldest just graduated high school a couple of weeks ago, and she turns 18 on Friday, and Amanda and I don't know what to do with ourselves because that makes us feel old now. She's okay with it. I have not yet come to terms. From a professional standpoint, I have worked in both the public and private sectors for over 20 years now. I'm an adjunct faculty at USU, but my day job currently is I work for a company on the East Coast. So I am a director and a project manager. I focus on helping institutions in higher education, so think the U or USU or Weber, navigate what is really a pretty confusing environment right now within higher education, more broadly speaking. And so that has afforded me the opportunity to work from home, which is great, and also given me some time to think about what I can do to serve. Thank you, I'll hold the microphone, I'll eat the microphone. What I can do to serve my community. I'm going to answer just two questions to start out because almost always these questions come up. And then, like I said, I'm going to stop and I'm going to turn the time over to you. Question number one, why am I running? I am running because fundamentally I have an obligation to serve. I was raised to believe in my family that if you have the capability to do something, then you are responsible to do it. That term obligation is deliberate. It's not a choice, it's an obligation. If you can do something, you have to do it. And I find myself at a point in my life, and I see my community and I see our country, and it is a country with a system that is fundamentally broken. And it's a system that is not working for most of us. And it is a system that will not get fixed if we, all of us, don't step into this space and decide to do something worth doing. So I have an obligation to do that. That's my responsibility because I can. At this particular moment in my life, I can, and so I have to. That's really the core of it. There are other issues and things that came up that sparked this decision, but that really is the core of why I am running. The second, I think, major factor there is I look at my girls. They will have fewer opportunities than their mother or their grandmother. They will have fewer rights. They will have less chance to do something worth doing in this world because of what it looks like right now. And I do not believe that in good conscience, I can sit still and not try and make that better. I will not leave them a world that is fundamentally worse than the one that I got. I will not leave them something that is so broken that they have no hope of seeing something better. We can talk about that in more depth if you would like, but I don't think it is a surprise that our young people have stopped getting married and stopped having children. They do not see a future for themselves. And if we want to change that, it's our obligation to fix it now. And that's one of the other reasons why I'm running. So the other question that we often get, can we win? And I think it's important that we preface everything else that happens tonight with an answer to that question. You don't know me. Hopefully we get a chance to get to know each other. I'm pretty straightforward, not a big fan of bullshit, and I will be honest with you as best as I can be in the questions that you ask me. So can we win? 2026 is a unique year in American and Utah politics. I'm a first-time political candidate. I do, however, have 2 degrees in political science. I did both my graduate and my undergraduate work at USU and poli-sci, and I have taught American institutions to college freshmen for years. I am telling you that this year is fundamentally different. And it's different for a couple of reasons. Davis County is one of, if not the most left-moving county in the United States. The other of the top 5 that's in our district is Cache County. 2 of the top 5 left-moving counties in the United States are in my congressional district. The reason that that shift has happened is because Americans, and Utahns here specifically in northern Utah, we have grown very frustrated at what we see happening at both the national level and at the state level. And we are frustrated, again, that this is not a system that works for us. We see representatives who enrich themselves. We see representatives who don't show up to public forums. We see representatives who approve corporate data centers without any public input. And we're very frustrated by that. We are shifting, I won't say to a Democratic Party, but we are shifting towards good governance because we're very frustrated with what we have seen so far. Additionally, if you have followed the national landscape at all, you will know that there has been hundreds of special elections that have taken place over the last 18 months or so. Democrats have outperformed in every one of those special elections from 11 to 30 points, meaning that they are doing better than expected by 11 to 30 percentage points. There's another data point that I think is interesting and valuable to be thinking about at this particular time. That switch has already happened in Davis and in Weber counties and is happening in Cache County right now. Davis County has elected to its local city councils several individuals who already identify as progressive or liberal. They were elected in broad elections. On the Ogden City Council, 3 progressive candidates were elected last municipal cycle in 2025, so last fall. Out of 6 city council members who were incumbents, 3 of those incumbents lost their race to individuals that were running on the idea that government should work for people. And they won. There were 4 progressives that ran in that race, and 3 of them won their seats against incumbents. This is not something that is 10 years out. This is happening right now. So can we win? The answer to that question is yes. It is not guaranteed. And if anybody on my campaign staff says that, oh yeah, we've got this in the bag, let me know who it is so I can smack them upside the back of the head. That is fundamentally not true. We can win this year, but winning requires a lot of hard work, which is why our campaign has focused on involvement from people just like you. Over 200 people, almost 300 now, have volunteered with the campaign. That's why I know that we can win, because those individuals are out in communities like this one. They are talking to their friends, they are talking to their neighbors, and they're having genuine conversations about what we want to be better. And they're having genuine conversations about why what's happening right now doesn't work for not just maybe us, but for our kids and our grandchildren. Those conversations, as they happen every day over the next 4 or 5 months, are the reason that this campaign can win. Because I understand at my core, my responsibility is to serve you. That's what public service is supposed to be about. I am your representative. The issues that people are concerned about should be the issues that I focus on. And so tonight, you won't hear me talk about a campaign platform. I don't have a platform in the traditional sense. I am focused on restoring good governance. I am focused on getting rid of corruption in the system, but my policy priorities are the policy priorities that will help people in this community with the problems that they have said they need help with. So if I have a community that says we can't afford a home, we can't afford health care, well, then that's my policy priority. If I have a community that says I'm worried about the Great Salt Lake and the fact that we don't have enough water and the fact that if it dries up, we lose all of our communities across northern Utah, well, then that's my policy priority. But I'm not coming into this race with a set of things and a list of check boxes, and you're going to vote for me because I'm going to check that box. I feel like that's fundamentally bad representation. My job is to make sure that your concerns are addressed and taken care of in government. And so tonight, what I'd like to start out with, what are you concerned about? What do you need me to do? And what questions do you have for me? And like I said, I will answer them as best as I can.
Why are you staring at me?
You looked like you had something to say.
Peter, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Like, a big concern of mine is the Stratos Project and the Great Salt Lake. Like, it is just well documented that if the Great Salt Lake dries up, it is catastrophic for all of us. And because we live in such proximity to the Great Salt Lake, it's our health that's going to be affected. On top of everything else, it's ecosystems. Like, what are some things that we can do to restore the Great Salt Lake in your opinion?
So I think there's a couple of things that we can do to restore it in the near term, the midterm, and the long term. And it's really important that we distinguish between those, because some solutions from a long-term perspective would actually be pretty devastating in the short term if we haven't adequately planned for them. We have been talking to a variety of water engineers and experts, including people at Utah's Water, Land, and Air Center. And there's pretty general consensus that from a federal perspective, there's two things that would do the most good for the Great Salt Lake. And I'm going to start there, and then we're actually going to talk about the fact that there's a lot of state issues that need addressed. But from a federal perspective, there's at least two things that a representative should be focused on. The first is securing funding for restoring water infrastructure. So if you've lived in the area, you know that our water infrastructure is old, it's aging, and it leaks quite a lot. One of the things that we can do immediately is start to repair that infrastructure. That's very expensive. We need federal funds to go ahead and support that work. If we do that, that provides an immediate boost to the amount of water that flows into the Great Salt Lake because we lose less. And so that's something that has an immediate impact. And it's something that a federal representative should be focused on doing. The second thing from a federal perspective that can immediately help is, quite frankly, wrangling the existing federal agencies that control a wide variety of land across the state. Utah has at least 6 federal agencies that control land here. And each of those agencies has different policy about what can and can't happen on that space, which means if you are interested in infrastructure development or restoration, you have to cut through a lot of red tape to make that happen. Our representatives should be front and center in those conversations. A representative that's focused on that issue serves in the committee that allows them to go ahead and make real difference in those conversations. Our representative is not interested in those committees, which is particularly frustrating for those of us who are directly impacted by the health of the lake. In the near term, there are other state things that can be done. I am grateful that I am not running for a state office because, quite frankly, some of these are uncomfortable conversations. The Great Salt Lake, at the end of the day, doesn't need money. It needs water. That's what the Great Salt Lake needs. It doesn't need money, it needs water. The question is, where does that water come from? Now, we live up in Cache Valley, and we have the Bear River watershed, which supplies 60% of the lake's existing water. Cache Valley does not benefit from any of the state policies about getting rid of your yard or about reducing water usage at the residential level. Those haven't made it that far north, despite the fact that, again, we are responsible for 60% of the water that flows in. That's a state decision, not a federal decision. I don't want the federal government making that call. I want state legislators to do it. The state has to make some real hard choices. What kind of state are we going to be? Are we going to be a state that builds data centers? Or are we going to be a state that supports residential growth? Are we going to be a state that continues to support alfalfa farming? Or are we going to be a state that decides that we need to transition those crops into something less water intensive while still allowing farmers an opportunity to earn an income? Because that is a huge industry. It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So you can't just tell them to stop growing alfalfa. But the state has to make those kinds of choices. If the state doesn't make those choices, then it leaves all of us in a pretty unpleasant situation. And that would be an environment where the federal government might have to step in, which from my perspective is the worst possible outcome. I do not want the federal government mandating what happens to Utah residents within their own communities. Those should be state level decisions. And I'm glad those two didn't hit each other. That would have been quite awkward. I know, right? So that's short term. The state can focus specifically on how we get more water. In the mid and the long term, Utah's part of the Colorado River Compact, and we have to acknowledge that when those water rights were first assigned, the Colorado River was at its highest level in history. It has never been at that level since. There's nothing to suggest it will ever be at that level again. That requires a serious conversation about how water is allocated, all the way at the top, all the way down to the bottom. Other states have acknowledged this, and they have created some water-saving programs that Utah has not yet adopted. For example, in Las Vegas, they recycle all of their water 3 times before it goes back into the ground. Utah does not have water recycling programs here in northern Utah. Now, part of that is because when Weber County uses its water, that wastewater goes to the Great Salt Lake. And so you can't start recycling that water unless you already have tools to get enough water into the lake. That's why that's a long-term solution. You can do water recycling programs. We should do water recycling programs, but we can't do them until the health of the lake is already taken care of. So that's a long-term solution. There's a variety of things that we can do. I will say this. For those of you who water your lawn less, thank you. You aren't helping as much as we need to because most of the water usage is not from you. Keep watering your lawn less. Like, that's a good thing to do. But what you really need to do is put pressure on your local legislators to have real solutions that put billions of gallons back into the lake, not 15 or 20. So thank you. That's a very good question, Rachel. Thank you.
So what are the biggest, like if we're going to go pressure our legislature, then what are the biggest industries that are gobbling up that water that we can't put that pressure on?
Alfalfa continues to be the single largest source of water usage in the state, which is why I said I'm glad I'm running for a federal office and not a state one, because that one is tied to local culture and politics so deeply. We have to acknowledge that our alfalfa crop is exporting Utah's water. So about a third of that crop, depending on the year, actually gets exported to places like China or Saudi Arabia, which means we have basically just given our water to a different country. And so that has to be addressed, right? If you're going to have real conversations about the fact we're in drought, that we don't have enough water for local residents, for local business, and for local agriculture, why do we keep shipping our water effectively overseas? You can say at a legislative level, can you please go ahead and just add 2 lines to existing legislation? That would actually give the governor executive authority to go ahead and be more assertive when it comes to water right allocation. Right now, the governor cannot declare emergencies that give him the power to go ahead and reallocate water rights in times of drought or when the Great Salt Lake is below a minimum viable threshold. if the existing law was changed just to account for those two factors, it would give the government the legal authority to start to make decisions about how water is allocated. But that's currently not legally possible. So if you're going to go if you're going to go encourage a local legislator to take action, that is definitive action that could have meaningful impact for the rest of us. Other questions? Again, I'll do my best to answer them.
I remember you said you get into politics or run for this office because you believe there's certain things that need to change. What do you believe are the top 3 things that need to change in your opinion? And if you're elected, what can you do to change those?
There's a lot that I could add on that list. So I'm going to grab one, I think, from a corruption standpoint, maybe 2, because I think fixing systemic level corruption is necessary before we can have anything else that works. The first thing that I would do is make sure that public servants don't individually benefit monetarily from their time in office. There's no reason why members of Congress, their family members, the executive branch, their family members, the Supreme Court, their family members, should be allowed to trade individual stocks, should be allowed to accept large gifts, should be allowed to put bets on Polymarket over policy decisions. All of that is fundamentally corruption. And so that is absolutely one of the things that I want to see changed. Public servants should be there to serve the public. I fundamentally disagree, and this is on both sides of the fence, right? Nancy Pelosi got rich while she was in office. Blake Moore's gotten rich while he's been in office. This isn't really a left versus right. This is a nonpartisan, this is corruption. I don't care who's doing it. I want it done. Kind of following up on that, right now Washington, D.C. has a habit where people who retire from Congress immediately go back into lobbying. And so they can use influence to go ahead and determine what's going to happen. And they might have received some promises while they were in Congress that if you vote a certain way or support a bill, then you have a nice job in my lobbying firm at the end of the day. I think that's corruption. And so I would ban Congress, individuals from Congress and their high-level staff, that once they've retired, they can't go into lobbying for at least 5 years, bless you. Like, they would need to take a break, because if there isn't one, then it encourages, again, corruption in the system. And that, to me, is fundamentally wrong. I don't want a corrupt system. You can actually fix both of those. There are a couple of broad national alliances that I am part of that would go ahead and make immediate changes with the newest session of Congress. There's enough people there across the United States that have signed on to these pacts that you can get existing legislation across the line. Some is already on the House floor, just hasn't received enough votes to get passed yet, and to put pressure to get it signed. You just need more people in Congress willing to sign that legislation. I can do that really early in my tenure. Banning lobbying would take a little bit more effort. There is some legislation in that space, but it doesn't yet have enough votes. It would take a broad coalition to go ahead and get that one across the line as well. I would say that the third piece on corruption, and I don't know how anybody here feels about it, Citizens United was a fundamentally bad decision. I don't think that our democracy is stronger or healthier with unlimited spending from anybody, whether that's an individual or a corporation or a super PAC. Money inherently creates conflict in our system, and it creates skewed loyalties. Citizens United has allowed both Democrats and Republicans to spend billions of dollars at this point on influencing political outcomes, decisions that should be made here in a community by people who are voting. And if I can, that is one of the things that I would like to see overturned. I don't believe that Citizens United was a good decision, and I think we need to legislate to remove that kind of money from our political system. Those would absolutely be at my top 3. The good news about Citizens United is it doesn't necessarily take federal action to do that. I don't know how many of you follow the news, but Montana and I believe Hawaii have already put forward state-level initiatives to go ahead and restrict corporate ability to influence political outcomes. They haven't been tested yet. I don't know if they'll hold up in court, but because corporations receive their rights or power at the state level, states actually have the ability to go ahead and govern them. And so if a state says corporations incorporated here cannot do X, that is a state right. And I am always happy when states and local communities exercise their authority instead of requiring the federal government to step in. The federal government's supposed to be there to solve problems too big for us, but there's a lot of problems that we can handle without them telling us what to do. So
what's your thought on term limits, and then once you're out of office, continuing to get paid for the rest of your life, and also having top-notch health insurance for the rest of your life?
Yeah, term limits and congressional benefits, right? So our campaign has actually been pretty vocal. I am in favor of a conversation on term limits. And more than that, I've already specifically stated in public multiple times that if I am elected and I do a good enough job to earn your trust again, I won't run for more than 6 years. Like, I will not serve in the House for longer than 6 years. I've got kids and I'd like to spend some time with them. And in a district with almost 1 million people, I know there is at least one person out there that can do this job better than I can. My responsibility then during my last term in Congress would be to find good people and mentor them and help prepare them to step into that position. That would be my obligation. That being said, I do think term limits for the House and for the Senate should not just be 6 years. It takes time to get good at the work of governance and legislation. Most legislators don't get their feet under them until about 4 years in. That's kind of the average. And so I support term limit discussions of about 10 to 12 years for the House, 2, maybe 3 terms for the Senate. And I absolutely support at least age limits for the Supreme Court. We need to have a conversation about how the court itself is designed. As to benefits that congressional officials receive once they have retired, the problem isn't that members of Congress have a retirement or health care access. The problem is none of us do. That's the core problem. I don't mind somebody receiving health care or a retirement package because they have worked. I just want everybody else to have that same benefit. If we're going to have a healthcare conversation, we should be real frank about this. The single most cost-effective solution to the healthcare costs that we face right now as regular people is a single-payer system. It's a single-payer system. That doesn't mean that you get rid of private health insurance. Private health companies should be able to continue to exist. It's a free market. If people want to go ahead and spend their money on that good or service, they should have a right to do that. But the most cost-effective solution for the healthcare crisis is a single-payer system. So that's what we should look at doing. And that allows every American to have access to the same benefits that our congressional representatives have. When it comes to retirement, at the very least, we should get rid of the payroll tax cap on Social Security. Mitt Romney himself, he's the one that says we should go ahead and do this. The payroll tax cap on Social Security means that citizens, regular people who have worked every day of their life and paid into that system, are at risk of not receiving the retirement that they were promised. This is another issue I feel pretty strongly on. Social Security is not entitlement. Okay, it's not an entitlement. You earned it because you worked for it. My parents worked for it. I'm working for it. Everybody who is paid into that system was promised that that system would be there for them when they needed it. That's what Social Security is for. Removing the payroll tax cap means that everybody pays their fair share into a system that benefits Americans, broadly speaking. I don't have a problem that members of Congress have retirement. I have a problem that they have a benefit that regular Americans don't. And if they have it, then everybody else should have it too. And that's where I sit on that issue. Any other questions, please?
You talked about Congress corruption, but I'm just curious. In a really hot race, Congress might be one of the worst branches of government, and it's a big hot race. But what's Congress doing wrong right now? How is it gotten so broken?
How has Congress gotten so broken? Part of that's our fault, and I think we need to take responsibility for it. One of the reasons that Congress is so broken today is because we as Americans have stopped voting our conscience and just kept voting a party line or an incumbency. And that's our fault, right? At the end of the day, if our representative doesn't represent us, it's our obligation to vote them out, to vote somebody else in. And as Americans, we have not done that. And when we don't do that, we just consistently reward bad behavior. I mean, if I get elected to Congress and I make all of the worst choices and I pad my own pocket and I ignore my constituents, but they still vote for me anyway, I have no incentive to make a better choice, which means at the end of the day, I was responsible for the fact that my congressional representative is making poor decisions. So that at least is part of the conversation, right? We have an obligation to make better choices, to be more involved. I think the other part of it, though, is certainly within Congress itself. Partisan politics is often talked about in any political race, and for any of us who are over the age of 30, we at least grew up in a system that worked at some point, right? We're able to look back in the past and say, you know, there was a system that functioned. Maybe I didn't agree with all the decisions, but at least it seemed to function. And it doesn't function now, in part because the partisan divide has become so entrenched that it is impossible for individuals to go ahead and work across the aisle as effectively as they might have done in the past. That's a problem, right? I think this is one of the issues that has happened with our current representative. So 6 years ago, when Blake Moore ran for office, I voted for him. All right, full transparency, I did. I thought here was a moderate Republican. He has experience in the civil service. He's a pretty sharp guy, right? Like, he's very intelligent. He seems to get it, and I certainly, we could do a whole lot worse, right? And so I'm glad that he's going. And his first 2 years in office, he really did focus on that. He focused on nonpartisan or bipartisan legislation. He focused on working across the aisle. He seemed dedicated he had town halls, right? He's here listening to people. He's here having the conversation, and he seems like he's our representative. He's been in Republican Party leadership now for a couple of years, and that really has just completely shifted where his focus is and the kinds of decisions that he makes. When I have a sitting representative who represents my values refuse to speak ill or even mention the fact that we have people in office right now who have participated in trafficking and raping children because his political party won't let him have that conversation, then party politics has become more powerful than the voice of the people. And that's a fundamentally broken system, right? That was one of the things that broke me when it came to Blake Moore's current time in office. I genuinely felt that somebody that shared my values, that shared my faith, would at least draw that line that requires no partisanship, just basic human dignity, just basic humanity, and say, this is a red line issue for me. And I don't care who's on, right? If it was the Clintons, I want them to go to prison. I don't care, right? This isn't a political issue. This is a human issue. And the fact that they can't even have the conversation lets me know that partisanship has broken our government. How do you fix that? You vote for people that refuse to put party over their responsibility to the Constitution and to the people of their district. That's what you do, and you do it every time. And I'll be honest, if you elect me and in 2 years I have betrayed your trust, you vote me out of office. You do. You vote me out of office, and you put somebody in that you can trust to do the job that they are supposed to be doing. That's your responsibility. Do not continue to let representatives ignore us. They won't change if we do. Thank you. Other questions? I don't know how long they've let me hold you hostage tonight, so
There's questions.
I've cleared my evening out. Please.
In your introductory remarks, you mentioned some of the challenges for young people today. You know, not getting married, not having kids, and a lot of that is, you know, here in Utah and across the country, economically based. It's a challenging time for young people to make their way. How do you diagnose the economic issues we're facing? How do you go about addressing those? You feel confident?
I think for those who couldn't hear the question, it was how do we diagnose the economic challenges that we're facing, and then what can Congress actually do about them? I think that the diagnostic part has, in large part, already happened. When we look at our economy, it's starting to be K-shaped, right? Which means that those who are very wealthy keep getting wealth faster. And those who aren't already wealthy have a very hard time even surviving day to day. We have the world's first trillionaire on paper, which, guys, I don't know how you feel about Elon Musk one way or the other, but a system that allows a trillionaire to exist while child hunger rates in Utah have doubled over the last year is a system that's broken. It's fundamentally broken. And I think properly diagnosing that is what allows us to see what a solution can look like. My inspiration for this is actually Dwight Eisenhower, who was a Republican president back in the 50s. He was the Supreme Allied Commander in World War II, a deeply respected individual. And he correctly identified that the strength of the American economy, the economy that helped the United States win World War II, was in its workers. It was in the everyday people that showed up to do their job. That was the strength of America. And he correctly called out that there is a concern in the United States when the regular people are left behind. And he's right. He was right then and he's right today. So how do we fix a K-shaped economy? Well, the very first thing that we can do is we can start closing loopholes that exist for the ultra-wealthy. Every person who has made $1 billion in the United States made it because of you and me and our taxes. Our taxes paid for these roads. They paid for our schools. They paid for healthcare access. They paid for our firefighters, our police forces. All of the other social services that exist were paid for by our taxes. And when somebody uses our system to benefit themselves, there used to be an understanding that they have an obligation to pay it forward. Nobody in America has a problem if somebody gets rich. It's the American dream. You work hard, you have the support of your community, you get a little lucky, and you definitely can have a life better than the life of your parents. And you can give a life to your children that was better than yours. That's what we work for. We have seen that trust broken now. When an organization or a corporation like Palantir pays 0%, but I have teachers in my district and firefighters and small business owners that are paying anywhere from 20 to 30-something% in taxes, that's a broken system, right? When I have an individual like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos who has a 2 to 5% tax rate, well, again, I don't pay a 2 to 5% tax rate. My taxes went up last year despite the fact that my income didn't increase. That was a direct result of the big, beautiful bill that got passed. So if we want to fix that, if we want to fix that K-shaped economy that so many people struggle in, the first thing that we have to do is close loopholes that allow the wealthiest to continue to build their wealth at the expense of everybody else. That's the very first thing that Congress can do. I think the second thing that we can do from a congressional perspective focuses on corporations specifically. If a corporation has employees that are dependent on social benefits, that corporation shouldn't receive a tax break. Shouldn't. You can't double dip. If a corporation pays a fair wage to all of its workers and provides opportunities for them where they don't need any access to social services that taxpayers are providing, great, corporation, you should get a tax break because you are being a good steward of the resources that you have access to. We can fix that at the congressional level. We can change corporate tax law to say, if you're not paying a living wage to your workforce, you're not eligible for a tax break. If you are paying a living wage to your workforce where they're not dependent on our taxpayer dollars, then you deserve a tax break. That's what that tax break should exist for. That in and of itself would help correct a lot of the wage gaps that we currently see and allow people like my kids to look into the future and say, you know what, I can actually earn enough money now to pay for a life, which they don't feel right now. So I hope that answered your question. Yes, ma'am.
You start with corporations that are double dipping, and they're not putting that money into a system. Where is the money going to come from to the employers? But that those people are not working for. So if they're not paying, and the employers are often going to up the ante on them, so that they are putting money into the system. Can you make them do that?
So to clarify, when you say they're not paying their money, who are you specifically referring to? Yeah, so corporations in general, can we make them pay taxes? Yes, we can. The federal government has the authority to go ahead and make people pay taxes. I know it's not a popular position. We do have the IRS office, one of them here in Ogden, Utah, which is in our district. And I don't know how familiar any of you are with it, but for every dollar we invest in the IRS generates between $7 and $12 in revenue for the country, because their responsibility is to go out and make sure people pay their taxes. So this isn't even actually like increasing the tax rate. This is just telling people to pay your fair share. Like, we have an agency here designed to have you pay your fair share, and you've got to stop dodging your taxes. So yeah, we can absolutely do that. It's interesting that the current Republican administration has decided that the IRS should be defunded as much as possible, because that hurts us, our ability, regular people, to have access to the services that we're supposed to have access to. My wife and I were very poor when we were married and when we had kids. And we benefited from social programs like WIC, which is now SNAP. And it gave us the ability to make sure that our kids had access to good, healthy food. And it allowed us to build enough of a foundation that with hard work and the support of other people, we could be where we are today. Child hunger, like I said, in Utah has doubled. It's went from 1 in 10 to 1 in 5 children last year. And that's at the same time that our current Republican Congress decided to cut access to SNAP benefits. I'm just inherently frustrated that we have systems designed to help people get back on their feet. And every time we cut those systems, every time we destroy opportunities for people to get a solid footing, we just perpetuate even more cycles of despair and poverty. And poverty is expensive for the nation. It just inherently is. We want communities that are healthy and thriving, where people work hard and they know that their hard work leads to a positive outcome, that they trust the system will work for them. Because when they don't trust it, why would they work hard? And right now, a lot of people feel like, why do I work hard? Like, what's the point of me putting that effort in? And I think almost more than anything else, it's that destruction of hope that I am fundamentally fighting against. We should have a system that works, that people trust, so that they will continue to believe that their future can be better. My future could be better if I work hard. My kids' future could be better if they work hard. That's supposed to be the promise. And right now that promise has been broken. So, but yeah, we can make corporations pay their taxes.
It's been pretty silent this last year as far as, we've been, for those of us that have been writing communities, it's been kind of frustrating that we don't get anything back. We don't have town halls. How can you commit to it?
Pretty easily, I commit to it, but we have something to back that up. We have actually held town halls. Oh, sorry. So Blake Moore and Senator Curtis, they have not been making themselves available to us. They don't respond when we call or when we write, and they don't do public town halls anymore. They have some telephone town halls, which I don't know if you've attended, but they pre-screen the questions. It's very formulaic. And then at the end of it, he says something like, yeah, it was so great to be able to talk to everybody. This was a great experience. And they hang up, and a newsletter comes out in a couple of days, and there was no substance that happened. I think the reason for that is I was at Blake Moore's last in-person town hall that he held last summer in August. There were about 100 people there, and it was spicy. Like it was. People were frustrated, and a lot of those people were people who identified, like they said, listen, I'm a Republican. I'm not here because I'm against you. I'm here because I need to understand why you're making the decisions you are. And he left that town hall, and he has not held another one since. We have held town halls in the district 4 to 5 a month ever since we started actively being out in the community last November. So that's a commitment that I have made, and we have kept it. So I had town halls in Centerville, I think, is where we're going to be in Davis County at the end of the month, right? So we will have another open to the public. You don't have to pay a fee. It's not a fundraiser. We will be at the Centerville Library, and I will be here doing what I'm doing right now. Anybody who wants to come, ask questions, and let's have a conversation. It is your right, if you are angry or frustrated, to tell your representative that you're angry or frustrated. Their job is to be here. It is to listen to you and to represent you. And that can't happen if they don't make themselves accessible to you. And so we have already committed to that, and we have kept that commitment. And going forward, it's a commitment that we will keep. Because of the nature of legislation, I can't commit to like 4 every month across the district, just because I'll be back in DC doing legislative work. But what I have committed to is, if I am not in DC, this is where I am. This is the work that I am doing, which quite frankly, again, leads to the fact that, guys, I only want to do this for 6 years at the absolute most. Like, let's be honest, if you're doing this job right, at the end of 6 years, you should be pretty tired. You should be wanting to find somebody else that can step in for you. And I fully intend to wear myself out in that. Please.
So maybe this is incorrect, but it feels like we're supposed to have three branches. You're supposed to have checks and balances. However, Congress being a logjam all the time, the courts are now in a judiciary legislative mode where they're having to decide policy. It should be made in Congress. The executive branch is off the rails, in my opinion, and the judiciary, they say don't do something, and he's just saying, whatever, I'm going to go do it. They really have no teeth without the purse strings.
Yep.
How do we break this and bring back balance so that no one branch takes control and decides our future in a way that is a small subset of voters put them in? It's the extreme that vote people in primaries, and those people are on the ballot. So how do we break that so that we all are represented? We're a republic, right?
Ranked choice voting or mixed member representation districts are the two most effective tools to ensure we have better representation in the legislature. But I think to the question about, like, how do you fix the system right now? We should be pretty clear. So executive actions or executive orders are not unique to the current Trump administration. Congress has abrogated its responsibility to govern for a long time now. And if you look at the Obama administration, then Trump 1, then the Biden administration, and now Trump 2, executive orders have consistently increased. Because while Congress refuses to do its job, the country still needs to run. And so we have turned our president into less of a president and more of a dictator. And right now, with the current administration, that authority has started to break the norms that used to govern good governance, right? So we actually don't have a lot of law that determines how the executive branch is going to handle its business. We have norms. We have, well, it's always been done this way, or we have a gentleman's agreement. The current administration has blown through all of that, and they continue to do so, which leaves the courts in a difficult position. And whoever's the next president is just going to inherit all of that authority, right? And they're just going to keep moving forward in that direction. Congress has to do its damn job. And I apologize, Mom, for swearing, but Congress needs to do its job. Like, this is the fundamental issue. Congress is supposed to be holding oversight hearings. Congress is supposed to be pulling anybody from the executive branch in that is not fulfilling their oath to the Constitution and holding them accountable for their decisions, regardless of the political party. That's Congress's job. Congress is supposed to be saying, if you cannot abide by our funding, then we're going to give you line item budgets, right? We are going to tell you exactly how many dollars you can spend on any action within an agency, because until you start respecting the rule of law, that's our not just our right, but our duty to ensure that executive overreach doesn't happen. This goes back to the partisan question, right? We have become so partisan that the party in power turns a blind eye because they think that regardless of the harms done to the system, a policy priority is more important. And I fundamentally disagree with that. At the end of the day, this system of a republic should outlast all of us. Our democracy should outlive all of us. And it will only do that if the system itself is fundamentally strong enough to resist this kind of corruption that we see. And that goes back to some questions about, well, what can we do? Well, the first step is to start to get money out of politics. The first step is to prevent congressional officials from immediately serving special interests. It's an enforceable code of ethics for the Supreme Court. Honestly, it's a judicial overhaul, right? It's maybe saying, okay, district courts now have the authority to hold the Supreme Court accountable for their ethics. So those justices can face a trial of their peers if they violate ethics. And then if that still doesn't solve the problem, Congress maintains the power to impeach, right? There's always a final option there if necessary. Those are all things that we can do. I know this is going to be a broken record response, and so I apologize for it. None of that happens unless you do something. That's the honest answer. None of that happens unless you do something. I can say I am not overly fond of our current president. I don't think that he's doing a particularly good job. But I am grateful for this. If nothing else, Donald Trump has made the rest of America stand up and decide that we have to get involved in our government again. We have to.
One quick follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
So, not just the current presidency, but before, it's a broken record where cabinet members come before Congress, are vetted, and they lie through their teeth. We know they're lying through their teeth.
Yep.
And then they go do something else. How do we fix that so that, as you said, you can haul them back in, you have oversight? But what's the penalty, and how do we make it so that stops?
Impeachment. Every executive official, every cabinet secretary can be impeached. That's what you have to do. So you pull them in for oversight, they lie to your face, and you say, here's the receipts. We know that you have lied to us, so now we're going to remove you from office. The president is still allowed to suggest somebody else, right? That's executive, that's a part of the executive power structure. And the president can appoint somebody else. And that new cabinet secretary can go through the nomination process. And if they lie to us, guess what? They're gone too. Yeah.
We'll support them for taking this.
Yeah. But you have to have, again, people that are willing to allow their representatives to make those hard choices. And I don't know if anybody saw this poll a couple of weeks ago. It said that 60% of Utahns are angry with both political parties right now. There's a reason for that. Genuinely, there's a reason for that. It's because both political parties, especially at the national level, have fundamentally failed us as Americans. They have turned this into a game. Politics is not a game. It is our lives. These are the things that impact us and our children and our grandchildren. And we have got to break out of that mold.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay if I get to sit down at this point, but if there are other questions, I am happy to do my best.
I just as a mother of 3 daughters as well, what is your stance on, we're moving backwards on women's rights right now. So do you see a stopping point? Do you see us moving back in a trajectory that we get back to women having rights again?
Absolutely. It takes electing people that will go ahead and codify those. That's what it takes. I wasn't exaggerating when I said my girls have fewer rights than their mom or their grandma. I look at the SAVE Act, right? Guys, Utah has the most secure voting, full stop. Over 90% of people use mail-in ballots. It has increased accessibility. The reliableness of our system is unquestioned. The Lieutenant Governor's office did an audit, and they're like less than 0.1% of all of our registered voters might have a problem. Like, this is a system that fundamentally works. We don't need legislation on the books that makes it more difficult for people to participate, specifically women to participate. Because depending on your reading of that particular legislation, my girls would probably never change their maiden name if they ever got married, right? Because if they change to a married name under that legislation, they would no longer be able to vote, which is a pretty big problem from my perspective. And so I'm grateful at least that we haven't seen the full passage and implementation of that, although Trump is insistent that it gets moved through before the midterm cycle. Can we halt that trajectory? Yes, we absolutely can. There's a phrase that many of you are probably familiar with. The moral arc of the universe bends towards good, right? But it doesn't go there in a straight line. Anytime we have seen a society improve itself and its welfare, it's a lot like this, with a general upward trajectory. We are always going to have opportunities to do better. And we're always going to have times in our history where we have fallen back a little bit. Our obligation is to make sure that we keep moving forward, that we never accept any of those fallbacks, that we take a hard line when we can and when we need to, and push it back to where it should be. And then hopefully it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Always 2 steps forward. That's the best thing that we can do. But yeah, we can restore that.
Healthcare that way with women, though.
Yeah.
Them not having a right at this point, that their doctors and them can't decide if it's the right choice for them. If they had a miscarriage, a lot of doctors aren't performing DNCs because they're afraid of them losing their license. So what changes can be made? I mean, they've changed it for the state level, but it really needs to be encompassed in all.
It needs to be codified in law that healthcare decisions, like all individual rights, should be between the adult and their healthcare provider. That's a healthcare decision, and that's where those rights should stay. I'm a pretty firm proponent of individual rights, and I see healthcare rights through that exact same lens. Healthcare decisions should be made by the individual and their physician. And if they are religious, then it's a conversation between them and their creator. That's individual right worth protecting. We have seen the direct consequences when those individual rights are violated. Does anybody have family in Idaho by chance? Okay. If you don't, and if you do, maybe you haven't talked to them for a while, Idaho passed some incredibly restrictive legislation, and Idaho is now losing its OBGYN and nursing population that support women's health. And as a direct result, women in Idaho are receiving less medical care and lower quality medical care, which is increasing the risk of mortality, both for the infant and for the mother. I personally am not in favor of abortion. I'm an active member of the LDS Church. But if you want to reduce abortion rates, it's not by banning abortion. We know that doesn't work. Anytime we have done it, all we have seen is an increase in illegal abortions that kill women and their children. If you want to reduce abortions in our communities, you create an environment where people want to have children. You make sure that when somebody is expecting, whether they intended to or not, that there's hope for them and their family, that they have a livable wage, they have a home that they can live in, they have healthcare access, that they see a future worth living. When that doesn't exist, regardless of what happens with the legality of a medical procedure, you're going to see fewer kids being born and being born into good families. There's actually an anecdote that comes out of the Cold War. It was in the mid 80s, and a CIA analyst, so the Soviet Union was still strong on paper. A lot of people thought it was going to live for another 100 years. And a CIA analyst came and said, they're almost done. 10 years. And this, I think, was like in 85 or 86. And the statistic that he pointed to was the increase in abortion rates that were happening within the Soviet Union, because the people that lived there had fundamentally lost hope in their society. And he looked at that and he correctly identified that that was a leading indicator of broad systemic collapse. Because when people stop wanting to have families, you have something fundamentally broken in your system. We cannot, as a society, expect our children to want to have children if they don't have a future to look forward to. And I'll be honest, I got 2 girls here and it breaks my heart. I don't know if we're going to get grandkids. I don't want them now, just to be very clear. But I mean, we talked to our oldest and she is brilliant. She is one of the most amazing people that I have ever known. And she is like her sisters. They are the best part of both Amanda and I. And now that she's an adult and she's thinking about the rest of her life, she's been pretty clear she doesn't know if she wants to have kids. And that hurts. Like that fundamentally hurts, because it means that this system doesn't work for her, and she has no hope that it will work for her. And that, I'm not okay with that. So as far as I will protect individual rights every day of the week, because regardless of my personal feelings, anytime we lose individual rights, as a society, we get collectively closer to a worse outcome. So I will protect individual rights every day of the week. I can kind of head off this question too, because it often follows along. I have no problem with responsible gun ownership. I grew up in a military family. And it's funny that those two seem to be linked, but they often are in these kinds of conversations. I have no problem with responsible gun ownership. Do I believe that there are things that we should do different? Yeah. 80% of Americans, I have some real problems with the fact that people can have access to firearms when they have a criminal record, that they can buy firearms without having a background check. Those are absolutely things I'm concerned about, but I have no problem with responsible gun ownership. So, yes, ma'am.
That said, I think that the woman or the person that's in the physician's office should have the choice to make that decision. Are you going to put an age limit on that? I mean, if the 12-year-old comes in, she shouldn't have to make that decision. Where do we stand on that?
Yeah, so where do we stand on the age of an individual? So I believe in parental rights, right? I think that parents absolutely should be involved while their children are still underage. If a 12-year-old is sitting in a physician's office and in need of reproductive care, something has gone wrong. Something has gone very, very wrong. And her whole life and health is now at risk because of something that, whether she thought she consented or not, she didn't, because she has no ability to consent to that decision because she doesn't understand what's happening in that situation. I believe in parental rights, and I would hope that her parents understand her and her needs well enough to make a good decision for her. Now, are there situations where that is not the case? People that have been abused by family members or individuals close to them, people that have been forced into situations where they're actually deciding that they want to be emancipated, even though they're underage, right? And the court itself has stepped in and said, this is a bad enough situation that even though you're not 18, you're legally an adult in the eyes of the state. Those situations, I don't have I don't have a one answer fits all. My general principle here is I want the best outcome for the individual involved in that situation. That's the outcome I'm most concerned about. And I would hope that her parents know her well enough to help make that decision. And if they don't, I hope that she at least has other trusted adults that can advocate for her. That's just a terrible situation.
I wanted you to please elaborate on what responsible gun ownership looks like to you. I'm sure everybody that has a firearm is responsible. But the majority of deaths in the
Yeah.
United States are due to gun deaths. And then I was wondering if you could also touch on how you feel about church and state and the book bans in Utah.
Yeah.
Those types of issues. And
Uh,
what you would do to change them.
Well, I can't do anything about book bans in Utah. That is a state level issue, and the last thing I want is federal involvement at that particular level. Again, as often as possible, I want decisions made at a local level because local government is always closer to the community. And so as a federal representative, I will do my best to be accessible. I mean, the reality is there's 900,000 people that live in this district. I can't talk to everybody. I can't meet everybody. And so as often as I can, I want decisions pushed to a local level because that's where you have the most accountability. You know your mayor, you know your city council, right? You see them in the grocery store. And so if they do something stupid, you can go hold them personally accountable for that decision. So the book bans, personally, I am very much opposed to them. We grew up in a house where we had a lot of stuff to read and we were trusted to go ahead and read it. And then we had a lot of conversations, right? And so that leads to good, healthy, I think, mature outcomes. We've tried to raise our daughters the same way. I don't like some of this fantasy romantic stuff that comes through the pipeline. But I mean, it's like that to me, like that's a state level issue or a local level issue. As far as responsible gun ownership, I had to take a hunter safety course, right? So I'm an Eagle Scout, and I had to take a hunter safety course before I was ever able to go out on the rifle range or shoot shotgun or anything else. I'm not allowed to drive that vehicle that we came here in today without being licensed and without driving it, right? I had to show somebody that I was competent enough to be able to have access to what did my mom call it, like a 2-ton death machine. And so that's something that we already do in other places. That one's more controversial, and I can see, I can understand. At a minimum, I would like everybody to at least take a gun safety course before they purchase a firearm. I just think that's good sense in general. I do support things like requiring people to lock up their firearms in their homes if they're not being used. Most firearm deaths are handguns and they're suicide. And it disproportionately impacts men. And a lot of times those deaths could have been prevented if those firearms were securely stored. And so I would like to see those firearms securely stored. And that's something over 80% of Americans also agree with. Responsible gun ownership for me also includes how I purchased that firearm. And so I have no problems with somebody doing a background check before they're allowed to purchase a firearm. And that background check should flag, like, is this a violent felon? Like, is this somebody that has committed violent crime? And if they are, I'm sorry, like that's a restriction that you're now going to be under is I don't know that you should have access to a firearm because you have committed violent crimes in the past. And so I think those background requirements should be universal. I don't think we should have loopholes where people can purchase and own firearms without showing, like I'm a responsible citizen and this is something that I can do. Other countries have, so like Switzerland, for example, I think is a good example of this. They do extensive firearm training because a lot of their citizens have to go through military training as part of being a citizen of the nation. And they actually have what we would classify as a military-style rifle in many homes throughout the country. And they have a very low rate of firearm death. And so the gun ownership isn't inherently the problem. There are other things behind it that lead to misuse and improper use of firearms. So I like going shooting. Like, if I had enough money, I'd probably go more often, but it's kind of expensive these days. So, other questions? Oh yeah, church. Well, thank you. Yeah, church and state. Sorry, I looped that one in the book band in my brain. Constitution's pretty clear on this one. We have a separation of church and state. That's where it starts and that's where it ends for me. I have no problem with anybody who is faithful or chooses not to practice in faith. That should be every person's individual decision. No government in the United States should ever use faith as a criteria for any decision that it is making. I think it was particularly, I'll say, hurtful when the Pentagon went ahead and released a list of religions and it decided to classify who it did and didn't consider as Christians. I consider myself a Christian, and the faith that I practice, I think, is a Christian faith. And so I am quite frustrated anytime I see any government decide to use religion for any reason as a measure of making a decision. That's not appropriate. The reason that we have a separation of church and state is we have seen what happens when government and religion blend together. It always ends up in the abuse of regular people. So.
Can I just say how frustrating it is too that suddenly our senators were up in arms about that issue, and suddenly something got done. Now it didn't end up in including the Latter-day Saint religion in Christianity. Instead, they just removed the label in general. But they acted like that was the win, and that's upsetting. It's just incredibly upsetting that they could actually do something, and then they celebrated something that wasn't actually a win. Just saying. I don't know.
Well, and I think it's a good point. Like, they could do something. Like, at the end of the day, they could do something. If they cared about any of these issues, Blake Moore sits on the freaking Ways and Means Committee, which is one of the most powerful committees in Congress because it controls everybody else's money. And so he has the authority, and he's also in House leadership. Like, he has the authority and the power to say, if an issue was actually important to me, I can make something happen. And he refuses to do it on any of the things that we have talked to people about as being their top concerns. Listen, I am as grateful as anybody else that we were able to apportion a small part of land near the University of Utah so it can come back to the state. That's fantastic. I'm glad that we did that. I really wish that same kind of effort could be put into the widespread systemic issues that everybody else can't keep living day to day with. And they could do something. And I think that's, it's a good point. It's particularly frustrating. You know, it is 8 o'clock and you guys have listened to me long enough, so we should be done with this. Just a couple of things in closing. Again, the broken record, but it's true. You are the reason that anything changes. It's not me. At the end of the day, it is not me. You are the reason that anything changes. If you want something to be different, my encouragement, like Rachel had said earlier, get involved. Okay, now if you look at me and you decide, hey, this is not my candidate, I respect that. Go find somebody who is and get involved. Go find somebody that you think will represent you well and help them do something good. Go get involved. Now, if you'd like to help us, we will be very grateful for it. We have, like I said, almost 300 people that have signed up, which is just mind-blowing to me. They are doing everything from knocking doors to making phone calls to inviting people on their front lawn for a conversation, just talking to friends and neighbors, doing social media work. There are a million things that we can have your help with if you'd like to do that. Lindsay back there is our campaign manager, and she will put you to work. She certainly puts me to work, so I can promise the same for y'all. The other thing is, I want to be very clear. We do not and will not accept corporate PAC funding. I can't stand here and say that money in politics is a problem and then accept tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions, which is what Representative Moore has accepted from corporations in good conscience. It's flagrant hypocrisy. So we will not accept any kind of corporate PAC funding. If you can donate, we would appreciate that, because all of those donations going to support volunteer work. They go to things like buying yard signs, which people donated because they wanted. And if you want one tonight, we have like 100 of them here that we have packed in the back of the truck. Those donations go to making it possible for me to travel extensively. We have, I think, driven about 9,000 miles so far. 10? And we haven't, like, we've personally absorbed all of that cost because I personally feel like this is important. I don't want my staff to have to absorb those same costs. And so all of those donations go to making it possible for us to be out in the community doing this kind of work. So if you can, we would appreciate that support as well. But again, most importantly, just go do something. Go find something that you care about. Go find someone that you believe can help do some good, and go do something. Even if that's not me, I just want you to go do something. So anyway, thank you. And thank you for having me, Rachel.